Howdy y'all, welcome back. Thank you for being here and thank you for the support on the last video. When we look at monumental accomplishments of the previous society, the society of the old world, or the society which thrived before the year 1900, many of the findings that we come across are only amplified by the disheartening attempts of modern academia to discredit these findings, a fact which is often scoffed at and also sometimes deemed to be a pseudoscience, but a fact nonetheless is that a large majority of the world has a legend, a belief within their ancestral roots regarding a great flood. It doesn't matter what part of the world you are from, you have a story of the deluge, a cataclysmic event which had at one time or another, according to these myths and legend, reshaped the cultures around the world. Now, many historians and scientists alike do not regard these legends as fact. However, throughout the years, others have attempted successfully to prove that within the timeline of many of the greatest cities across the world, this flood did occur. The true anomaly then becomes a question. Did all of these flood events occur? And if they did, were they occurring at relatively the same time period? Indeed, when we're searching the Abrahamic text for various mentions of the Great Flood, it is not difficult to find at all. And furthermore, the same mysterious floods are described in compelling detail in the most ancient of cultures. We have, for example, the Sumerian flood myth, also known as the Eridu Genesis, for which the entire Sumerian religion was formed from. This myth details the rise of man as a creation by the gods, and also goes into detail of how the feudal system was created, the origins of mankind leading up to the finding of the first cities, before this myth ends with the global flood. Modern theologists have argued for centuries of the vast similarities between the Sumerian flood legend and many aspects of the Abrahamic narrative, which was said to have arose at a later time. Why this becomes so important, it's essentially the root for the three Abrahamic religions, the point in history, this great flood, for the most part, that all three agree on the events that occurred. Today, the scientific community refers to this as the antediluvian period, marking roughly the fall of the first man and woman from the Garden of Paradise through the destruction of Earth during this great flood event. However, what's essential to all of these legends, these myths, these theories, is the presence of giants. We also have the greatest warriors of this time listed in the Abrahamic text, being referred to as the Gibborim or the Gibborim, said to be the stock of the mightiest heroes of that time, with godlike abilities but being from the blood of men. Confusingly, modern scholars today often conflate the Gibborim with the Nephilim, who the Gibborim were actually said to have done battle with. The Nephilim, as you may know, have an equally mysterious stock. However, if we entertain the Book of Enoch narrative, the Nephilim are the offspring of fallen angels who came to earth in desire of earthly possessions, including the love of earthly men and women. According to the Book of Enoch, the men and women of earth, with the fallen angels, created this offspring who are gigantic figures, often disobeying the rules of God, who used their power and their physical advantages to take over the communities which they invaded. According to this legend, the Great Flood, the massive deluge, was sent to wipe clean the earth of these Nephilim. Some modern fringe historians and theologians have put forward the idea that Noah and his family may actually be from the stock of the Gibborim, the heroic stock of man, and this may help explain why Noah is said to have lived for hundreds of years. Now, if these theories can all be entertained, can we also entertain the possibility that some residue of this narrative of the Great Deluge may remain, and within the fossils we could find, can we actually see evidence of giants, of the Nephilim? Tying this back to the modern understanding of history, we are told in centuries prior, life on Earth was once relatively larger. Everything from mammals to fish, reptiles, even insects were much larger in the distant past. With this understanding comes the idea that the plant life was also larger, enabling the other living creatures to grow. In such, the trees of the past could have been 500, 600, if not thousands of feet tall, providing ample oxygen for this acceleration of growth. Whether we consider the remains, the fossils of massive plants and animals to be a possible proof of the biblical narrative, I will let you decide. But today, we are going to look at dozens of examples of faces that are seemingly frozen in the rock, images of prominent mountain faces now considered to be naturally occurring, and yet these mountain faces bear a striking resemblance to what we might consider to be giants. Now, one of the most fascinating things that I've come across in this research would probably be Devil's Tower, which is found in the United States. According to the currently accepted mainstream narrative, we are told this is simply a naturally occurring butte, but according to some fringe theorists, this is actually the remains of something that existed before the Great Flood, before the Great Cataclysm. According to these theories, and again, they are only theories, but this could be a possible stump of a massive tree that existed alongside the Nephilim, alongside the giants before the Great Flood. When we compare the butte of Devil's Tower and similar buttes found across the world, and we compare them to petrified stumps found around the petrified forests, we see vast similarities in these structures down to the base, foundations, and core. We can even see rings on some of these buttes, and yet we are told this is all naturally occurring rock. As we dive deeper into this narrative, we're going to be looking at some really ridiculous photographs from the 1800s regarding these trees that were being cut down at the time and the largest trees in the world that were being founded. They were being discovered at this time. Now, the photographs are very telling. We'll be looking at groups of maybe 10 to 12 workers with just hand saws that were told are basically cutting down trees that are well over 300 feet tall. Some of these trees have a circumference of well over 50 feet. These are large trees that would almost be impossible to imagine being hauled away by men and donkeys. And yet that is what we are told was happening. So diving into this narrative further, we'll be looking at those photographs, but the main focus of this video, as I mentioned earlier, are the faces within the rock, the faces that were held so dear by many different cultures, the earliest men, the proto-men that were said to settle these areas. They essentially used the rock faces not only as markers for their travel, but also as places of worship. We're told in the current mainstream narrative, these faces in the rock actually have a name. They were known as Mimetoliths, and Mimetoliths were some of the most important geological features to the indigenous people, not only in America, but indigenous or proto-people being found all around the world. We are told that they used the rock formations, and that's how they garnered these names like the man in the rock or the chief in the rock. We are told these rock faces essentially paved the way for these societies to develop using these geological features as maps for their progression. But furthermore, we are told within the indigenous people of America, there's actually myths and legends that not only are these rock faces used for prominent features to help guide, but these rock faces are actually said to be the ancestors in some of these creation myths, frozen ancestors in time of the indigenous people of America. And I found that to be so fascinating. So to wrap up the video, right now what you are looking at are the largest trees photographed in the 19th century, photographed in the 1800s. And these trees are also some of the largest trees to ever be cut down. Why this is so fascinating, so remarkable, yet such a tragedy, is we are told that the teams that cut down these trees consisted of no more than a few men, maybe a dozen or 24 tops, and they're equipped with hand tools and donkeys, and that is what we are told was used to cut down the largest trees in history, at least the largest trees that we have photographs of. So I'll be sharing these photographs with you right now, and when we look at this, we have to consider that these were being transported somehow, once cut down, to the factories across the world. But at this time, these areas were largely undeveloped. So to imagine the small teams that were said to have cut down trees that were over 300 feet tall, some of them with circumferences over 50 feet, we can only imagine how this process actually happened. So we'll be looking at these photographs right now. Take it all with a grain of salt. We'll also be diving deeper into the Mimetoliths, or into the faces in the rock that were so important to indigenous people across the world. These rock faces were the prominent geological features that not only led to the earliest trails being made, but they also led to these locations being places of worship, and they weaved their way into the creation myths of multiple indigenous nations. So we will look at more of these Mimetolith rock faces, as well as the petrified remains, petrified tree stumps that can be found in the petrified forests across the world. And we will compare these petrified tree stumps to the buttes and other geological features that are now deemed to be naturally occurring, but in the past seem to have quite a different understanding or definition to the people of the world. So we'll dive into all this through the oldest and most detailed photographs that I could find. And I thank you all so much for being here, for being with the channel, for being with me today. Check out all my other videos. We have tons of information, so many photographs that you should save to your collection, photographs that need to be seen to be believed. And furthermore, if you want to reach out to me more directly, there is a link in my YouTube profile. But if you share this video, if you like this video, if you help this video reach other people, that will also do numbers for my channel. So I can't wait to talk to you. I can't wait to hear your comments down below. I love hearing your opinion on these different matters of the old world, of the world before the year 1900. I can't wait to read your opinions. I will talk to you more on the next video.